welcome to Frecuencias, bajas, charlas musicales. Again, with our English edition, we are right now in the episode 136, and we are very happy to have again a guest. We are going to introduce him in a few minutes. I would like to thank you all of our audience who are on the other side of the screen to being there every week in Spanish or in English. We are very happy to have this special edition in English so that we can bring artists who are not familiar with Spanish to Latin America. In this case, it is very special because he can speak almost any language, but we are going to speak just English today. Thank you for being there. Thank you for being on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can click on the bell and don't miss any of the episodes. Without more preamble, I will going to introduce my co-host who is there since May 2020, David Lopez. David, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you? I'm very happy to be here. Happy after a few weeks, after a few days in Colombia, I think like two days, 14 days or so. Happy to be back. I was telling James before we started recording that it was nice to go away a little bit from the cold and go to the tropics, and it feels great. I think I'm gonna try to do that every winter if possible. Also, like, very happy to be here and very happy to have James. Like you said before, like we might as well could be doing this interview in Spanish or Portuguese. My Portuguese is not very good, but I could keep up. But it's good to have it in English, and especially with somebody that you said that you were going to present James like in a few minutes, but I don't know if James needs a presentation. Anyways, very happy to have it here, and very happy to ask him some questions about current events and everything we do here in Frecuencias. That is not only tuba, but also like music in general.
Nice. Well, I think it is important for those young students or players who probably don't have met James yet to introduce him. I am very happy that he don't start speaking Gaelic, because if so, we are going to have a big problem. James Curley, a Scottish tuba player, he have played with very different main orchestras like Switzerland Opera or the BBC. He have been conducting the main British brass bands in the UK. He was dean in a university also in the UK. He is now conductor of the River City Brass Band in Pittsburgh, also a tuba professor in Duquesne University, but also is the actual president of the ITEA, International Tuba Euphonium Association. And we are very happy to welcome James. Thank you for taking your time and to being with us.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Kimarahu in Gaelic. How are you doing? Nice to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to having a nice chat.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you. And I always wonder, because there are a few players worldwide who have a very wide set of skills, and you are one of those. So, and we are living in a world right now where it is told very often that students, they need to have this wide set of skills because it's going to be tough in the future to work or earn money with music. So my first question is you're a university professor, so I assume you are trying to help your students to have a wider set of skills. Do you see that mostly universities today in the 21st century are working on that way? Because we have been talking with David a lot in other episodes that the universities are kind of struggling with these all changes and stuff. So what is your opinion about that?
Well, if you look at the word conservatory or conservatoire, it does have the word conserve in it. In other words, to keep something. And I find that there's a lot of idea of the orchestra being the only source of employment for musicians. And if you think of the music industry as a whole, Western classical music, classical music in general, is a very small part of it, about 2%. So there's a wide range of other music that we as musicians, doesn't matter what you play, but we as musicians could access. So I don't teach, for example, orchestral excerpts all the time. Sure, if someone has an audition, I'll help them with that because I have that experience. But I think if we can develop ourselves as artists on our instruments, then the whole world is open to us. Because if we're simply masters of the instrument, when we can apply those skills to every kind of genre of music, be it from reggae to pop to jazz, whatever it is, we need to be capable to play anything on the instrument at any time. But above all, I think we need to be receptive to every kind of musical genre, not just Western classical music. We need to be aware of the diversity of music that's out there, music by female composers, music by minority composers, music by BIPOC composers, music that just simply is good and different and we like to play. And, you know, the world then is much wider than just aiming for the orchestra. That's my opinion.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, especially here in the U.S. That living here for quite a bit and going to schools here and attending events. So many times we in the U.S. are focused only on what happens in the U.S. and we're here trying to chase the rabbit with the few orchestral auditions that are open and the military bands, and it seems like so many times like the universities focus on that, on only that path, and it's good to hear from you that that the way for modern days is embracing diversity and knowing what's happening there. But you mentioned something that caught my attention is becoming an artist in the instrument, and seeing you and the way you play and your footprint in the music world. I can say that you have achieved that. And my question is like for aspiring artists, for students that are starting to get to this route, like what are things that you would advise them to do in order to go to the next level? So many times we are focused on that flexibility coming out right, the basics, the fundamentals of the instrument. But what other things would you advise all those aspiring artists to do in order to move their career forward?
Well, clearly we need to be good at playing the instrument. That's clear. So every teacher is going to say, practice more. But put that answer to one side. So effective practice is something that I try and bring to my students, to tell them how to practice. Because you can say to someone, you should practice 2 or 3 hours a day. You're at a conservatory, you're at a university of music, practice 3-4 hours a day. But that some of that time could be a waste of time if they don't know what to practice, how to practice, and how to develop themselves. So there's a difference, isn't there, between what I call training, practice, and performance. There's a big difference. So for example, if I'm thinking of practice or training, then that has these elements. I have to improve an existing technique, develop a new technique, those things, or maintain something that I can already do. So these 3 things, if you can tick that box, especially develop new techniques, then that to me is training or practice. Mm-hmm. And to me, just playing a book of studies, that's performance. Now, the ratio between these 2 things is important to me. There must be much more of the former, much more of the training than the performance. So in my own work, I do a lot of training, scales, arpeggios, articulations, slur, range, dynamic, all of those things are part of the training. And a small part of the 2 hours that I would be working, that would be going to the music. And in my head, I actually call that rehearsing. So it's that division of the work that is important, because if you just go into a room and play, say, and there's nothing wrong with this, but if you go into a room and you play the entire Blazevich study book, volume 1, bravo, nice concert. But what did it bring you? Did it develop you in any way? And if it didn't, it wasn't a waste of time, but it was a performance. That was performing. Then the other thing I think we teachers can be doing is to guide a student into what goals they should be achieving. So a practice session or a training session without an aim, without a goal, is less effective, in my opinion. So if somebody has a weakness in their playing, and we all have them, nobody's perfect. If we have a weakness in our playing, we need to identify that weakness. And then we need to work on that weakness, to turn that weakness into a strength. Because the things that we're good at already, they're not going to get worse. They will still be good at that. It's not going to get any worse. But the things we're bad at are sometimes the things that we avoid in the work. So if we very neutrally say, okay, I'm not good at X, then you work at X exclusively until X is much, much better. Not perfect, but just improvement. And that's the other thing, is to set a goal that is a simple one. For example, let's take articulation on a single tongue. And if the musician can tongue at, say, quarter note equals 120, da 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 da. Well, that's something that's measurable. They can write in a notebook, today I played eighth notes at 120 with a single tongue and a good sound. Then they could go, okay, this is Thursday, on Friday, I'm going to try 122, not 140, 122. And then on Saturday, 124. And they don't move on to 126 or 28 or 30 until it's until it's really clean and good. This is a measurable goal. And you see, if we measure it, then we can aim for a higher goal. Once it's measured, it's not anything that's a guesswork. Then if we take the sound, and the dynamic range of a musician, the great brass players, the great musicians, they have a vast dynamic range. Doesn't matter if you're a singer, a violin player, cello player, euphonium, it doesn't matter what you play. The dynamic range is your key to being expressive. It's your key to touching the people in the audience. It's your key to engage the audience. So if you can play very quietly, the audience will come into your space because they have to listen. They don't hear, they listen, they come into your space. And if you can play very strongly, then the vibrations of your sound will go into their bodies, a bit like being at a rock concert. How fantastic is that? Well, we can measure that because on my phone, I have a decibel meter, and it tells me how quietly I can play and how strongly I can play. Notice I didn't say loud. How quietly I can play and how strongly I can play. I can measure that. And I can feel what it means in the body and in the face, to feel what it is to be unbelievably quiet and very, very strong. It's measurable. Therefore, I can aim for a target. I can aim to be quieter, and I can aim to be louder. So this is not performance anymore. This is what I call training. And so in a modern orchestra, or particularly if you're a soloist in front of an orchestra, a soloist in front of a brass band, oh wow, you have to be making a lot of sound. And I'm inspired, and this is no disrespect to anybody, I'm inspired in a strange way. So if I go to a tuba conference, a euphonium conference, and it's hard to hear the soloist sometimes. And we all come out and say, wow, the orchestra was too loud. But I don't. I don't say that. I say that soloist, and again, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm inspired by this because I don't want to be the person who isn't heard. I want to be the person who is heard. And then when the orchestra's playing, I have no control over how loudly the orchestra's playing. I have no control of that. I could say to the maestro in the rehearsal, "Maestro, the orchestra's a little bit loud at letter A," and he'll be nice and say, "Okay, I'll make sure it isn't in the concert." And then in the concert, the orchestra's doing this. So I have to have something that goes above that or above the orchestra, that projects through the orchestra. And that is physical. So training is physical. So I have a machine. Can I go off camera and just show you the machine?
Sure.
Absolutely, yes.
Don't worry, he's coming back.
So this is the machine. And so these are metal weights. And so it weighs, each one of those weights is 0.5 kilo.
Okay.
So I have to lift 1.5 kilos. It's actually just under 2 kilos with just my air pressure. Now you can imagine that's a lot of pressure.
That's roughly like 4 pounds, right? Like
It's just about 4 pounds.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah, it's 4 pounds, and these are steel weights, and so you have to really be a human air compressor to lift those weights. You can imagine that's not. It's nothing like that. That's going to be a big, deep breath, and also a very concentrated, fast airstream to lift those weights. So, because you can see I'm not young anymore, that's the thing I train the most.
Oh, I see.
That's the thing I train the most is the breathing. Now, I advise everybody to do that because, you know, that's the core of your sound. That's the core of your artistry. That's the core of your artistry.
Yeah.
Phrasing, dynamic
I
range.
Agree, I agree 100%, James, but I have a question, and it is, you mentioned performance and practices must be split and in different measures. It is a problem from the 21st century or have been a problem for brass players since ever?
I think it's a problem for all musicians. You know, what I think we can teach our students if we're teachers is how best to use their time in the practice room. They will spend far more time on their own than with us. So the greatest gift we can give them are the tools to improve themselves. They are their best teachers. They learn through experience. All we can do is to guide them. And I think that guidance is some along the lines for me is, you know, you play that really great. That's fabulous. Now, there's this thing here in your playing we need to improve. And I link a lot of my own playing and now the playing of my students, and they're probably, I think they like it now, but it was, in the beginning, it was rather strange for some of them. See, I link the human voice to what we do. So if you can say it, you can play it. If you can sing it, you definitely can play it. Because you only have one tongue, one mouth, one set of lungs. So it's no different from the singer. So if you can go da da di da di da da di da da di di da di dun dun din dun dun dun. Look what you're doing. You're practicing articulation. You're practicing aperture here. You're practicing tongue level inside the mouth. All of these have an influence on the sound. All of these change your sound and change your tone color and change the speed of the air. All of those things. So singing and free buzz, these are the things that are going to improve you. And it's totally natural. There's nothing unnatural about singing. There's nothing unnatural about speaking articulations. So if you go in a whisper, all you have to do is put the mouthpiece on and give more air, and you've got a great double tongue with a fabulous sound. That's it. That's all you have to do. But it's showing this, it's giving the students the tools to do that, so they can go away and make themselves better. That's my goal as a teacher.
Yeah, I definitely love like when you talk about measurable goals. You know, I can tell whenever somebody's being efficient in their practice, whenever you ask for their numbers, like if they can produce a number on the spot and say, hey, what's your single tone speed right now? And they come with a definite answer, that means that they're constantly monitoring that. And once they're monitoring that, you want faster, you know, like if you reach 120, it's like, I wondered how 122 would feel like 124. And it's the same with the speed of the flexibility, is the same with finger patterns, you know, like all of that is measurable. I like that idea of not keeping it like ethereal, like, oh no, you'll get better. No, just like step by step, follow your numbers, check your numbers, especially like, for example, when you talk about your cell phone that has everything we dreamt of for tools, you know.
Isn't it a bit like being a sports person? So, for example, if I'm a baseball player, for those that don't understand baseball, look it up. It's a great sport. If I'm a baseball player and my statistics at bat are, say, I'm batting, well, I'm going to give myself a big hand here. I'm going to say I'm batting 300. You know, if I could do that, if I could bat 300 at baseball, I'd be a multi-millionaire. But okay, we'll put that to one side. So that's a statistic. That's a statistic that I can try to improve. And these things are quite important. I still do. I have notebooks going back decades where I've written in, and I've been using a method for 35, 40 years by Claude Gordon. It's called The Systematic Approach to Daily Practice. And it has 52 lessons. So in other words, one lesson per week. And so I go through religiously from lesson 1 to lesson 52. And at the end of the year, well, I'm on lesson 3 again, because we're at the new year now. So it's been going like that in a cycle for decades. And I can see in the margin in the book, because I still use paper books, that in 1974, this was the note that I could get. This was the high note I could get. And then also, you know, I didn't write it every year, but when I got something significantly better, I would put the date in. And then, you know, you can see it going up as a graph. And it's just gradually working on the range, gradually working on the tone in the range, so that I've got the singing, the sound that's in my head, a singing sound, almost like, okay, no blasphemy here, but almost like a really big euphonium.
I like that.
Yeah. No blasphemy here, like a really big euphonium with that singing quality. That's what I like in the high register. That's what I'm always trying to get in the upper register. And then in the low register, like the big pipe on an organ. So how do you do that? Well, you work at the extremes, and you work gently at the extremes. But the Claude Gordon method, that I just follow the recipe, and it works really well for me.
Now, we might be preaching to the choir here, you know, and I like the word you said, gradually, you know. And here in Frecuencias, we have always insisted that there's no shortcuts, that you have to put on the work, and like you said, like a high performance like sportsman does. You cannot cheat what like your preparation. How gradual it's been, because one of the weaknesses that I've seen even in myself is that I get impatient. it's been 1 week, it's been 2 weeks, it's not working, so I'm just going to abandon what I'm doing and try something else. But it's all a matter of sticking to it and, understanding that progress doesn't happen overnight. Like seeing that Gordon book, like, can you tell how long it's taken you to develop a skill?
Yeah, I can name one skill,
Yeah.
because it's a trumpet book, and so one of the things that is in there is to try and play double high C, written double high C. So for the F tuba, that's going to be F above the high F, and you know, starting that program, I managed to get the double high C in about 38 weeks.
Okay.
So in my lifetime, that's a very short time.
It is indeed.
That's a very that's a very short time. But you see, I don't mind telling my age. I'm 66, and I'm still trying to get better. And
that's the way, right?
yeah, I'm still trying to get better. And the day that I stop trying to get better is the day I'll be dead.
Yes.
And therefore, I have a big collection of instruments, a massive collection of mouthpieces. What's that? It's not paranoia. It's just I want to be better.
Yeah. You're trying everything you can.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm trying everything. I want to be better than me. So the James Gourley today has to be better than the James Gourley yesterday. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
And wait till you hear the James Gourley of tomorrow. He's unbelievable.
That's nice. I like that. So James, this is very interesting and very inspiring, I think, for many people. I hope they're taking notes about what you are saying. But getting a little bit more in another direction of topics, I know that the ITEA, it is or have been working on being more international, more inclusive, more wide, more having more an international representation for all tuba players around the world. You as a president, if I'm not wrong, you are the first president who are not from the United States, or I'm wrong? I'm not sure.
No, you're absolutely right. Although I am American, I am an American citizen now. I was not. I was born in Scotland, so I'm the first person who wasn't born in America to be made president. But when I was elected, I was not an American citizen. So yes, I'm the first foreigner to be president of that organization. I'm very proud to be the president and thank the membership for their trust in me. And also, I have to say, I'm very proud that we have a president-elect who's coming in July, Øystein Badvik. He'll be the second non-American to be president. I'm very proud of these developments because as a life member, I've seen up until my own presidency that the organization was very American-centric and also very centered on American university professors. And although that's an important group, a very important group, without which there would be no ITEA because it was founded by American university professors, I think there's a wider group to which we need to speak. We need to be more inclusive of women and minorities, which we haven't always been good at. I'm being honest here. And there's been an atmosphere where some groups of people have not felt welcome in our organization. I want to change that so that everybody, if you play the tuba euphonium, doesn't matter who you are or what you are or where you are welcome in the International Tuba Euphonium Association. That's the message I would like to leave, because I'll be past president in June, July. If that's the legacy that I can leave, then I'll be very proud of that legacy. And I think we're going the right way about it with our new website, where you don't have to be a member of ITEA to be on that website. You can sign on as a guest, it's free, and there's lots of free things on there. It's new, the website, so we will be developing it so that there's more content for the amateur player, for the player who's not in an orchestra, for the freelance player, for the player who's over 60, for example, um, for the players that are in third world countries that might not have access to anything like that. They couldn't afford to be members. They can't afford to be, sign up for the journal. These are the people whom we should be serving. I think further down the road, there are things that we should be doing to fundraise so that people can come to the conferences that otherwise can't. And we don't have a mechanism for that yet, but I think we need one. Who would access those funds, and B, why? And so those are things I think further down the line we can work on. Instruments are so important, aren't they? Because I remember the first instrument I got from my village band in Scotland. Now, I come from quite a poor family. We were 6 people, my 3 sisters, my 3 brothers. We lived in a 2-bedroomed house, and my mum and dad slept in the living room. So we didn't have money for private lessons. In fact, I've never had a private lesson in my life. I've never paid for a lesson in my life. I'm saying it out loud. I've never paid for a lesson in my life because I was lucky enough to go to a village band where there was someone, Mr. Ross, who was willing to teach me. And the brass band gave me an instrument. And that showed me that there was an opportunity for me to leave my background and do something else. It would be marvelous if we could give those opportunities to people that don't have those opportunities, because our music profession isn't really that diverse, particularly Western classical music. It's not that diverse. If you look around all the major symphony orchestras, you'll find people who have had the means, more or less, by and large. These are people that have been able to purchase a good instrument somewhere along the line, and also to have private lessons. So if you're in a band in the school being taught by the band director's doing a great job. Those players that are generally a bit better are the ones that are also having private lessons on their instrument. I'd like to be able to see ITEA being able to provide some of those lessons, even on Zoom, because even a Zoom lesson is better than nothing. And I teach a number of young people on Zoom all over the world for this reason, that I want to give my time to them. I don't charge them. I want to give my time to them so that they have the opportunities that I had when Mr. Ross, the school janitor and member of the village band, taught me. To buy my first instrument, I had to play hooky from school. I mean, hooky, that means being absent from school, so I can work in the fields near the school, picking potatoes and earning money, so I could buy an instrument to go to the Royal College of Music. And I was able to buy a beaten up second-hand instrument at first. I was determined to be in the music profession, and I know there are people like me, but we need to give them help. We need to give them access to instruments. We need to give them access to expert teachers that otherwise they might not be able to access. That's my personal mission, and I think it should become the mission of the ITEA to help those people.
That is very interesting because David and I, we can grow up in South America when things wasn't like it is today. The information and the instruments, and still very tough for South America or Latin America actually completely. And I feel kind of how do you say that in English? Kind of someone who is trying to work for the euphonium and tuba in Latin America since I have, starting with the instruments. And one of the main problems what we have, because you know it better than me, I mean, your reality is not far away from South America. Your family is part from. So one of the main problems beside the economical part is not only the access, but also language. That is why we start this space. We start speaking, and we keep doing that in Spanish, and Portuguese too. it is any kind of strategy from the ITEA so that beside what you already mentioned, to try to get closer to one of the biggest communities probably worldwide, which is the Latin America community, if you see how big is Latin America and how awake is the euphonium and the tuba since the last 15 years. It is any strategy from the ITEA to say, okay, look, listen, we need to, if we want to go international, we need to go there, because at the end of the day, as you say, Europe have money, Asia have money,
Yeah.
but Africa don't, Latin America don't. I mean, how we are, it is working, or which strategies have the ITEA to try to get closer to these communities?
Well, if I was a politician, which I'm not, I would give you some kind of BS answer. But the truth is, we don't actually have a strategy for that.
Okay.
That's the truth. We do have links to the ETB in Brazil, the Euphonium Tuba group in Brazil, and their members are able to have proxy membership of the ITEA. That's a good thing. We have another sister organization in Spain, Spanish Tuba Association is a sister organization, but so far that's it. Plus offering on the new website access to people who can't pay. That's what we've done so far, but it isn't enough. It's not nearly enough, but we are aware that it isn't enough. And so I think with myself and Oyston, Adam Fry, and the rest of the executive board, this is something that we will evolve over the next few years. So, an actual strategy, I could tell you this is the plan, we don't have. That's the honest truth. But the idea that we should be doing it and that we need to be doing it, that is definitely in our minds. So yeah, as you can hear, I'm an honest person. You ask me a question, I'll tell you.
Sure, definitely. And for me, it's more important that you are thinking about to do that than you give me another answer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, we've reached out also to other. I've reached out personally to the Deutsches Tuba Forum. That's a slightly different kind of group, and they're not that interested in affiliating with us, but they have their own thing going. That's fantastic, and it's a very nice thing. But I think definitely we should be looking at Latin America, Brazil, and the rest of Latin America. In fact, I have personal connections to Brazil and also to Argentina through Trombonanza. I go there when they invite me. I'm happy to go there. I love that. I teach, after this session, I'll be teaching a young lady in Argentina on Zoom. And she's Juliana, if you're listening, Juliana, she's doing a great job. She's improving all the time. And she's a major talent. And so I think, I think professional players like myself, we can choose to do something, even if it's okay. There is that one student that I will teach for free. That makes a big difference to that person's life. And then you imagine the amount of us that are university professors that can afford to do that here in America and worldwide. If we all did that, just that one thing, that would make a vast, vast difference. And it would be a direct effect on that musician, on that young person. So I'm thinking out loud, but there's a nice strategy. I'm sure we could get people to volunteer to do it. The next thing is to get people to apply, to write into us and say, I would love to do this. And the reason I'm teaching Juliana is that I was on a podcast like this with Steve Rossi and Tuba Mania, and Juliana came and she played Oblivion on her F tuba, and I said out loud, if anybody on the I'm saying it again, if anybody on the podcast would like to contact me and ask me anything, please do so. You're welcome to do so. I'm easy to find. And she did. And I set up a Zoom lesson with her, and it was so nice for both of us that we meet practically every week for the last 2.5 years.
Wow.
Cool.
And
So
and she's coming on after this lesson, after this session. Yeah.
I'm thinking like things that ITEA and we in the US or the ones that are outside could do to make like the organization a little bit closer to Latin America. And I was thinking about like the possibility of probably like identifying who are those who can who are teaching down there, and see if the universities are interested in I don't know, paying for a membership or having the journal in their libraries. So many people in Latin America play the instrument, but they're not very familiar with the organization, precisely because they think that's for someone else. That's for developed countries. It's not for people like third world countries, if that term's still used. So it's like finding ways for the organization to be like more welcoming. So definitely that's like a good goal for the organization to have in the next few years. The other thing that I was thinking is like the amount of attendees to the events, to the ITEA events from Latin America are few. Like I can count them with one hand, and many of them are lucky enough that they have like contracts going on that allow them to come here. But if I'm thinking, for example, about the next ITEC, and if I was in South America and I wanted to go, you know, it's already too late for a person that is trying to start like all the paperwork to go to ITEA. So it started to also be more sensitive about like the different circumstances that our countries have. Sometimes, like if you're in Texas, you know, you don't have to think about a visa, even if, like for example, the IT, like for example, a few years ago, it was in Austria. So none of my friends were talking about a visa. They were more worried about getting the passport, because even some of them didn't get the passport. And then I had to like kind of talk to them. I was like, me as a Colombian, I mean, I'm a naturalized American citizen now, but in that time, like it was impossible for me, because, you know, I needed like an invitation. I needed to go to an embassy and apply for a visa. And I think that's one of the main like obstacles that people that would like to come to South America, besides the economical part, is the paperwork part. And yeah, we're not politicians and we cannot fix what the immigration law says, but at least we could be a little bit more mindful that those are obstacles that people that would like to come to our conference would face, and see how we can, you know, at least like help for them to start that process. One of the problems we're having right now is that with some South Americans is like they need a visa, but they're not gonna get, like for example, an official invitation until perhaps the proposal we sent is approved, if it is approved, you know. So by the time it is approved, vital time has been lost in terms for those people to get there. So I would like to see in the future like a conference where, you know, South Americans are there showing their craft, especially because through this journey of this space we have here, like we have found a myriad of good players, good pedagogues, good teachers that are doing good things there, but against all the odds, you know, and that are worth showcasing, are worth bringing and participating in these kind of events. So
good point. Very, very good point. You know, people probably don't realize I do, because, you know, although I'm American now, I know what it's like to get a visa to come here and work.
yeah,
And it takes a very, very long time, especially now. There's a backlog of visas. I'm not going to mention a name, but a famous tuba player friend of mine who was booked to do a concert here at Duquesne University couldn't come because he couldn't get his visa in time. And we're talking about someone who lives in a European country, let alone any other part of the world. So, yeah, I think you've made a really good point, and that's something definitely for us to be looking at, the international visa situation. I'm sure it's something that's not been thought of before.
Yeah, so and I'm glad we had the space to talk about this specifically. I mean, and I'm aware that this situation, because I'm an immigrant too, these situations are not going to be resolved overnight. But at least if we put it in the radar of our board, if we put it in the radar of people that are going to be part of ITEA, I'm sure we can start thinking about this and increase like the diversity that you talked about at the beginning of this program in the organization as well. I still think, like, as a South American, I still think that the organization is North American centralized, and I still think that we could be doing a lot more to bring ITA to those who really need it, who need it most, you know. And I think it's not only like a one-way communication here, on one-way beneficial relationship, is mutual, because once we get all that talent from South America, man, we're gonna see the diversity they can provide. And I'm sure you have seen it in your visits to South America. Every time I talk to somebody from South America or Latin America, for that matter, or hear things that are happening there, I'm like, man, I would kill to have this in a conference where it might get a little bit dull, because we're all playing kind of the same things, you know. So whenever we have like something new that can refresh, that can inspire, I think it's going to be like a two-way relationship there. So like I said before, I'm aware that these problems are not going to be solved overnight, and I don't even have a solution for it. Like I wish, you know, but if we start thinking about it and see how we can be more accessible for those who come from disadvantaged like situations, I think that's a right step for ITA.
I think we totally agree. All three of us on this call are immigrants.
Yes.
But he lives in Germany. I mean, all three of us understand this. And well, I think, as I said earlier, you made an excellent point. I think it's something for us to think about. The whole process of applying to be in the conference or present at conferences, not just ITEC, but regionals as well. That could and should be a lot earlier, so that it gives people a chance. And as you're right, to take the economic side off the table, just that simple opportunity for people, because if people have the opportunity, they may be able to find, and let's face it, it'll be a lot of money, but they may be able to find the money for the plane ticket, the hotel, and all of the rest of it. But the visa is the visa, and if you're not going to get it in 3 months, you're not going to get it.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, like, in order to procure those resources, like so many of the institutions down, the way it works down in South America and Latin America in general is that they were asking, okay, where are you going? Who is inviting you? And sometimes it's not even like the visa part, it's having like an official statement that says like, okay, we're going to host this conference in this place, and this person it's invited to attend, you know, and, you know, perhaps that's going to require like starting the process of selection and proposals a little bit earlier, or at least expediting those proposals coming from out of the country, and see if we can have a different timeline. But yeah, like I said, I wish I had like the solution for the problem, but just bringing it up and start thinking about it, I think that's going to be like the way of a truly internationalization of the organization.
But also much better planning process. Suppose, I mean, we've known there's going to be, say, one knows that there's an ITEC happening at least a year in advance. So if the invitation to make proposals was a year in advance, that's to everybody's advantage on the planning, not just those that need a visa, But those that need to, book a hotel or book a band or book transport, it's just better for everybody. Book venues, book. It's just better for everybody.
Yeah, so like for example, right now we're waiting on answers for proposals that are sent for the coming ITEA, right?
Me too.
And
Me too.
yeah, and so it's already too late for Latin American players. Yeah, it could work, but like I say, if we can expand the timeline like a little bit longer, and these are things that perhaps haven't been thought about because most of the people in the organization don't have that kind of issues.
Exactly.
So
They would never have any experience of having to ask for a visa for practically anywhere in the world. If one is an American citizen, you don't particularly need a visa to go to England or Austria or anywhere else. But if you have another color of passport, then you probably are looking for a visa for almost everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's only folks like us that would know that, to be fair. But now that you've brought that point up, with which I agree, I'll bring it up at the next executive committee meeting, and then we'll kick it down the road and see what happens.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
Very good.
So we have a few minutes less into the end. I will like to ask you last questions so that we can round a little bit the conversation. You have been, David and I have been talking a lot in Frecuencias also about the British brass band culture, and you have been conducting kind of the worldwide best brass bands. So, yes, I know. So, if you have conduct also brass bands in Switzerland, like Tres Etoiles, right?
Yeah.
In the kind of work what each band on sound does, like the British ones, because they use a sculpture, a very distinguished vibrato, and what the Switzerland ones does, and what you have experienced in Germany. What can you say? There are kind of the difference between each of them. I mean, I have listened also. I got lucky and listened to as well in 2019.
Yeah.
On the composition competition in Montreux.
All right. Okay.
And for me, it was also a shock, like listening a Swiss band who can play like Tres Etoiles.
Yeah.
What will you say as a conductor that you approach these different bands on sound, just that topic?
This is a really difficult question. And
I was thinking and we just have like 5 minutes, and let me say that this is going to be a part 2, probably.
Well, if you need a part 2, I'm willing to make a part 2 to talk about only this. But my personal approach is quite simple. Is that when I go into rehearse any group, doesn't matter if it's a brass band or a string orchestra, I do that too. They have a sound. They have a sound because it's people playing and not a machine. So then I think you would waste a lot of time trying to change that sound. What you can do is to make sure that you hold the people to their sound, that they make the best sound that they can make. And then if you can do that, then you can concentrate on making music with those people. Because they're people. It's not a machine. It's not.
Sure.
You don't go up to a keyboard and say, "Hey, So you're dealing with people. You've got to encourage the people. My ethos is to encourage the people to play at their best and better than their best, and that results in something that's really beautiful. I mean, why would you want to copy anybody? Because a copy is always substandard. A copy isn't sincere. A copy isn't real. A copy is nothing.
So we are going to make a second part on that topic, but you agree with me that it's not the same sound both from Brick House and Tres Etoile and Foden's and Black Tie. There are 4 different sounds for 4 different bands, right?
It's not the same sound between Brick House and Black Dyke, and they're only 12 miles apart.
There we go. Yeah. Well, but we need to do a second part just
Absolutely.
just on that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah. This hour went by too fast, and man,
Yeah.
we didn't even dig into like British brass bands and your experience like conducting, and you can talk about American brass bands too. So so
You
That's
probably
true
had
too.
you probably had younger people on the show before, but if you lived to my age, you've done a lot of stuff.
That's true. That's true.
That's funny.
True. So we are coming close to the end. Thank you very much, James. I really appreciate. I know we know that you are busy like crazy teaching and conducting and with everything you do, and we are very happy to have you here and very thankful to have you here. If you have a last few words that you want to say, microphone is yours.
Well, just to say, enjoy your music, because if you don't enjoy it, nobody else will.
That's a great.
that's beautiful. I love that.
Me too. So again, thank you very much, James. Thank you, David, like every week, and thank you everyone to be on the other side. We see you next week with the episode 130 from Frecuencias Bajas, Charlas Musicales. Bye bye.
In Spanish. Bye.
Español.